Hey guys, what's up? I worked at a company about 10 years ago that over the period of about 3 years downsized by 25-30%. It was just kind of normal business cycle stuff. And so just every once in a while, every few months, randomly the morning would start out and HR would start sweeping through the engineering floor and just targeting people. Here's your box, you're gone. And there was a group that sat on the other side of the cubicle wall from me, and it was called Engineering Supplier Support. And what they did is they would we would buy parts, we would buy raw materials and things for our completed products that we sold. And sometimes those parts would be, say, the wrong specification of metal, the wrong kind of heat treating, they would be machined improperly or something. And it was the job of engineering supplier support to work with the supplier and try and figure out, is this something we can still use, or do we need to throw away this, $30,000 piece of thing that we've spent so much effort producing, or can we put it into our product and it's still safe? And so engineering supplier support had something like 8 engineers and then one manager who also did kind of engineering work, but also did some of the kind of functional management stuff of the group too. One morning, HR comes down that row and man, they swing the hatchet and they grab 6 of those guys and out the door they go. So engineering supplier support in a moment goes from basically 9 people to 3. And so over the next week or so, I hear the kind of hushed conversations over the wall between the 2 regular guys, not the manager, but the 2 regular guys just kind of, talking about how there's no way we can do all this work. Essentially, their workload tripled when the group went from 9 to 3. And so you could tell their morale had suffered. So one morning I'm sitting at my desk and one of the guys, one of the regular just engineer dudes, not the manager, he gets a phone call. And I didn't really know the guy. I probably said hi to him a couple times, but we never had a conversation. He was about 30 years old at the time, and he had this preposterously deep voice. I'm not even going to be able to like do an imitation that gives credit to how deep his voice was. But he gets a call one morning, and so I just get to hear his side of the call. And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ha 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 ha. No. No. No, it's not gonna get done. No, it's not gonna get done." And this goes on for like 10 minutes, just him like alternating between laughing at the person on the other side of the phone and saying, no, it's not gonna get done. And at the time, I kind of struggled to understand what was going on, because I still had this kind of attitude of, work hard for the company and you'll get ahead. And I've been thoroughly broken of that at this point in my career. And, looking back on it now, a decade on, I realized that, like, listening to that conversation was one of the formative moments of me realizing that in your career and in a lot of other things in life too, you have to be careful about how emotionally committed you become. And I know that will sound kind of aloof and kind of heartless, but you cannot afford to become too emotionally committed to everything. And especially not your career, not an employer, not a group you work with, not a group you manage. You have to balance that. And ultimately, the 2 most scant resources you have in your career are time and enthusiasm, and you have to jealously guard both of them. And that gentleman whose half of the call I listened to that morning, he had thoroughly come to a point several days after HR had walked through, hacked up 6 out of the 9 people of the group, and then his workload essentially tripled. He had come to the point where he had no more emotional enthusiasm to give for that project, and he was willing to just tell people no. And it's very healthy, and it really helped form me and over the long timeline get me to the point where I'll just happily tell a manager no. I'll just say no. It's not going to fly that way. It's not going to be done by this date. It's not going to accomplish this. No, things cost money. They require man hours, and if you don't want to invest in creating the product, then you will not get the product. And it's very healthy to come to that point in your career and stop giving everything you have for people who will not support you with the manpower, with the resources, with the time to get your job done. Learn how to tell people no, especially in your career, but in all facets of life. Just learn to put your foot down and tell people no, and it really helps. And it's something that when you're a young 23-year-old engineer and you walk in full of piss and vinegar and you think you're going to change the world, and you'll say yes to anything they ask, and you get taken advantage of. Companies will run a good horse to death. And over the decades, you realize, man, I have to be a mercenary. I have to do this for the money, and I have to jealously guard my enthusiasm, and I have to control how much emotional energy I put into all of this. And now that's something that, that now that I manage other engineers, that's something I tell them, and I convey that story to them, and I tell them, you have to be careful about how emotionally involved you become in this, because when you get too wrapped up as your identity of the work you do, then when something fails, you take that way harder than you should. And especially when it fails because some other person, some project manager didn't scope a project correctly. Somebody didn't allocate budget sufficient for the work that needed to be done. And then they skated out the door and you're left to clean up the crap. Well, don't get too emotionally involved and be willing to tell people, no, the budget was never sufficient. It's just not going to get done. And I don't know, maybe I'm a burnt out husk of an engineer at this point, and, maybe I have too bad of an attitude, or maybe I'm in the right spot. I'll only know in retrospect in another 10 years. So, I don't know, kind of an off-topic, weird, low-effort Sunday thing to talk about, but, I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and that listening to that guy just laugh into the phone and alternate between laughing and saying no, it was the perfect thing. It was perfectly healthy, and I think there's a lot we could learn from that about controlling how emotionally invested we get into things so that we can preserve our own enthusiasm. Let me know what you think, guys. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join me on Funnel Trade. Join the Patreon.